Why, hello there. How's it going? Welcome, everybody, to another episode of D&D Optimized, part of the D4 network. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not necessarily to tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one option for how to play a character in the hopes of creating something that is both very powerful but also very fun to play in-game. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build a particular character that you're looking at building, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm super happy to have you. So thanks for being here. My name is Colby, and I'll be your host. Before we jump in, really quick, just a reminder to like the video down there, that little thumbs up button, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. That goes a long way to helping me and helping the channel to grow and helping the videos to do well, so thank you. Also, just a reminder, I haven't reminded people about this for a while, we do have a subreddit, in case you didn't know. There's a link to it that I post in each video description. It's a fantastic little community. It's up to almost, I think, 2,500 users now that do a great job of sort of posting ideas and questions and thoughts on builds and sort of curating, but it's a lot friendlier than most subreddits, I think. We don't currently have, for those who are about to ask, a Discord channel yet. I hope to get one day when I have more time. I'm not sure when that will be, maybe when I can quit my day job one day, but Tales of Veneria does have a Discord, FYI, in case you didn't know. So if you haven't checked out our live play sessions, we do record our game each week and post it in the Tales of Veneria playlist. So be sure to check those out. And if you want to talk about the game, the characters there, or anything that we've got going on, be sure to check out the Discord that we've set up recently for that. All right. So there's something about rogues that not everyone realizes, I don't think. I know it took me some time to learn this little fact myself. Obviously, you already knew this, but for everybody else watching, the damage that you get from sneak attack, we're told, is applicable once per turn. Now, there's a big difference between once per turn and once on your turn, or once per round. So sure, you can deal sneak attack once on your turn as a rogue, but also if you make an attack against an enemy on someone else's turn, you can apply sneak attack again, assuming of course that you meet all of the prerequisites for sneak attack otherwise. Now, when are you making attacks on an enemy during someone else's turn? Predominantly on an attack that you make with your reaction. When you use your reaction to attack a creature, it's typically on someone else's turn other than yours. An opportunity attack, for example, is made when a creature moves out of your reach. It happens then on the creature's turn as they are moving. So if you're a rogue making an opportunity attack and you otherwise meet all the requirements for sneak attack, right? You have advantage on the attack, or you have an ally within 5 feet of the enemy that you're attacking, then you can add your sneak attack damage to the opportunity attack. I have tried to take advantage of this neat little fact a couple of times so far in previous builds. Once in my rogue cleric team up, link to that there. For those who don't know, sometimes I will do like 2 character builds in a single episode, meant to be played with like you and a friend, where the 2 builds are meant to synergize with each other, right? And that was one of those. In that build, the order cleric was giving the rogue an extra attack on the cleric's turn. And also once in the wolf and coyote team up build that I did, another 2 builds in one episode, where the rogue was ideally getting a reaction attack against an enemy who attacked their barbarian ally. I have yet to try to take advantage of this little extra sneak attack as a reaction trick into a single character concept, though. And that's what we're going to do today, because I love self-sufficient characters. Someone who can reliably trigger a reaction attack and therefore get sneak attack damage a second time in a round without depending on something happening to or from an ally. Now, one note. A few weeks ago, I did an Oath of Vengeance Paladin build. I'm going to run out of cards early today. That I had a lot of fun with. I told this story then, but I actually started to write the script for today's character several weeks ago. And because I was building a burst damage melee character, at a certain point, I started adding paladin levels for smite damage, like you do. The problem was, once I started with smite, and particularly with Vengeance Paladin, it was really hard to stop taking pally levels. And before too long, it wasn't really much of a rogue at all. It was basically just a Vengeance Paladin with a rogue dip. So I decided to scrap the rogue stuff altogether and just build a Vengeance Paladin, putting this on the shelf with the intent to come back to it soon. And today is that day. Now, like I've hinted at here, because of the limited number of resources that we will have available that will allow us to reliably do this sneak attack as a reaction thing that we're going to be doing, I'm going to be building this character today for Nova damage or burst damage, meaning that we won't be able to do the kinds of numbers that we'll be hitting every single round, but when we do, it will be really powerful with the intent to hopefully totally take out a single enemy, or at least nearly so. Also, I do want to emphasize that for me, this character's primary function is to be a really great rogue. A rogue who does fantastic burst damage, yes, but a rogue sort of first and foremost. What I mean by that is that I don't want to get too sidetracked from increasing my great stealth, sleight of hand, trap disarming, lock picking abilities, etc. in the pursuit of more and more damage. Most parties and most campaigns in D&D can really benefit from having a character with this specific skill set. And while no, it's true that you don't have to be a rogue in order to disarm a trap or pick a lock, I think that they're generally best suited for the tasks, or at the very least, they're a very popular option for someone who really wants to play that type of character in-game and take on that role in your party. So, among other things, I am outlawing paladin levels for myself here. Smite is great for burst damage, but I don't want to be as mad as multiple ability score dependent as I would need to be to pick up paladin levels for one thing. And I just don't want to go down the paladin rabbit hole this time. And so, character concept complete. I proudly present episode 69, the Swashbuckler Nova. And yes, big apologies to everyone who wanted me to do a super seductive bard build for my 69th episode. Come on, you guys know me better than that. Besides, I kind of already did that character concept with the Skill Monkey. Oh boy. But, if you really want something, okay, fine. Go Glamour or Eloquence Bard, take Expertise and Persuasion, maybe dip Fey Wanderer Ranger, max your Charisma, and bam, knock people's socks off. Pun intended, but that's as much as you're going to get out of me for a super seducer. My apologies. Also, before we jump into the build really quickly, I do want to tell you guys about the sponsor for this week's video, Son of Oak Game Studios TTRPG City of Mist. If you love tabletop role-playing games, but wouldn't mind a D&D break once in a while, then I think you really owe it to yourselves to check out City of Mist. I don't have nearly enough time to tell you guys all about this really awesome RPG, but let me give you a few highlights really quickly. The setting for the game kind of reminds me of the Dresden Files series of novels by Jim Butcher, or maybe even American Gods by Neil Gaiman. It's like high fantasy, folk, and fairy tales meet our modern day setting with a very healthy heaping of noir. Maybe you could almost say it's like one part D&D, one part cyberpunk. Let me read from the creators themselves. City of Mist is a modern city where legends are real. It's not as if knights and monsters walk down Main Street donning shining armor or breathing fire, but rather that knights and monsters are reborn inside ordinary people. These people, known as Rifts, live out a modern version of their legends, but they still have their ordinary lives. On the occasions when they tap into their mythos, a mysterious and mystical force hides their miraculous powers from those who have not awakened to the legend inside them, the sleepwalking residents of the city. It makes armor look like a flak vest and fire breathing like a party trick or a gas leak explosion, so no one ever knows about the rifts except the rifts. This mystical veil is the mist. This is its city. The look and feel alone of this game and this setting is amazing. The art is stupendous, as you guys are seeing. It has a very sort of detective comic book feel to it, which I really love. I mean, you can create your own character, of course, or if you're starting out, you can pick from a dozen or so pre-generated characters that will help you just jump right in and really get a feel for the game quickly. If you're nervous about learning a whole new system and creating an ideal character right off the bat. And I really love some of those pre-generated characters, actually. Anyway, they've just recently launched a new 10 adventure campaign book called Knights of Paintown that looks like a really fun and like cinematic journey. It's basically 9 smaller adventures or cases that all get connected in a 10th overarching case. If you're watching this video the day that I release it, they're actually running a Black Friday sale that expires today. So check that out for sure if you want to take advantage of some big savings. But even if you're catching this video after the day that it releases, there's still a sale on their products until the end of 2021. It's still a nice discount. So do yourself a favor, use the link in my video description to check out City of Mist. That's how they know that you heard about them here, so I'd appreciate it if you used that link. But give City of Mist a try. It looks incredibly cool and like a lot of fun to play. So big thanks to Son of Oak Game Studios, and let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, I can see us starting 2 different ways here as far as our class goes at level 1. On the one hand, if you value having more skill proficiencies, your dexterity saving throw, and in general having roguish utility right from the get-go, I would start rogue here. I'm going to start with fighter for a couple of reasons. 1, better survivability at the point of the game when our character is at their most fragile. 2, better equipment options. And 3, I said a couple, okay fine, few, your constitution saving throw proficiency, which is always good, but will be especially important for us later on. As most people know, the 3 most important saving throws generally at most tables in most campaigns in D&D are constitution, wisdom, and dexterity. Those are the saving throws that we have to make more often than others, right? With this character, we're going to be maxing our dexterity, and we will get an ability to further buff our dexterity saving throw eventually, but our constitution will only likely ever be just okay. So getting proficiency in that saving throw, I think, makes us a little better balanced. Plus, I actually really like the story arc when starting fighter here. So yes, when we first meet our hero, they're probably a soldier, or maybe in the city guard. They might be a mercenary or a caravan guard, etc. And let's be honest, they're probably a little cocky. They're quick, they're sure-footed. They've got panache and style, and maybe a little more bravado than is good for them. As for our race, I am going to recommend that we go custom lineage here. There is a feat that is very powerful for us here that I would love to start the game with, and so that's what I'm recommending. As for what that free feat is, I want to take Magic Initiate. There are a couple of spells that we can really benefit from throughout our character's career, and I don't want to spend a character level dipping into a caster class in order to get them, because it would make us a lot more mad and further delay our rogue levels as well, which, as I've already said, I really don't want to do. So with the Magic Initiate feat, we get 2 cantrips and 1 first level spell from any full caster's spell list. We're going to choose the wizard spell list. The 2 cantrips that we will pick will be Message, because I love being able to scout ahead for my party as a rogue and then telepathically message back what I'm seeing to my party without having to go all the way back to them. The second cantrip is going to be Booming Blade. We will be using Booming Blade throughout our career, and just in case you weren't familiar with this spell, when you cast it, you make a weapon attack, and if the attack hits, you will, once we hit level 5 anyway, do some extra damage on the attack, and then if the character willingly moves before your next turn, they take some thunder damage. That's 1d8 for now. As for the first level spell, the first level wizard spell that we get, yes, we're going to want to take Find Familiar. This spell that we get from the Magic Initiate feat can only be cast once per long rest, so we better get something that gives us big benefit and lasts a long time. With Find Familiar, you summon a spirit that takes an animal form, and it lasts until you dismiss it or it gets killed. It obeys your verbal command, it acts on its own turn, and we can use it for a number of things. It can scout ahead for us, we can even see and hear through its eyes and ears if it's within 100 feet of us. It can't attack, but yes, it can take the help action, among other things, and that's of course the main reason that we want it. So if your familiar takes the help action, they can potentially, ideally, grant you advantage on your next hit. For a conversation on whether or not you get to choose who the familiar grants advantage to, see our Sliding Into My DMs episode there. As usual, yes, I would recommend taking the owl as your familiar because they get the flyby feature, meaning they could fly in on their turn, take the help action, and fly away without taking an opportunity attack. Your familiar is super fragile, they only have 1 hit point, and you only get to summon them once per day, as I've said, so keeping them safe will be very important. If you want to take another familiar and think you have a fancy way of keeping them safe, or you want to reflavor the owl to be a different creature or whatever, that's great. Discuss it with your DM. As for our ability scores, using the point buy system as always, I'm going to recommend that we go with a 15 dexterity and take our +2 there. So we have a 17 dex, a 14 constitution, a 14 wisdom, and a 12 charisma. I would have loved to get a higher charisma ability on this character, but short of rolling stats and getting really good rolls, this is the best that we can do to meet our needs. As for the equipment that we start off with, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I would say just take scale mail, make sure you get a shield and a rapier for your martial weapon. I would go with heavy armor for now, unless you want to be like a non-rogue rogue. Maybe you took a background that gives you proficiency with thieves' tools or something, and you want to be like scouting and stealthing even as a fighter, in which case I would go the gold buy route here and pick up some studded leather instead of scale mail. You'll have a slightly lower AC, but you won't have disadvantage on your stealth checks. And then as a fighter at level 1, we do get the second wind feature, which allows us to, as a bonus action, once per short rest, heal ourselves for 1d10 plus our fighter level. That'll be really nice, especially early on when we're really fragile, like I said. But we also then, as a fighter at level 1, get a fighting style. And on a character who is prioritizing burst damage, I think dueling is going to be the best fighting style for us. We could go 2-weapon fighting, but we're not actually going to be taking the attack action because casting Booming Blade is not taking the attack action. It's casting a spell that just happens to also grant you a weapon attack, right? And that means then that because we're not taking the attack action, we would not be able to make an offhand weapon attack, as a bonus action like you can do when you're doing 2-weapon fighting. So no 2-weapon fighting style for us, and that's okay. I'm actually very content with the rapier and shield style for this character. In fact, I might even consider taking the defense fighting style here if you really wanted to lean into the tank aspect of this character. More on that later. But anyway, dueling gives us a +2 to damage if you're using a melee weapon in one hand and no other weapon in your other hand. It's not a huge bump, but we'll take it. At level 2, as a fighter, we get Action Surge. You know it, you love it. It gives us an extra action once per short rest. We just get an extra action, not an extra bonus action, just an extra action. 2 actions per turn is very nice, especially on a Nova or burst damage character, and so that makes us happy. At level 3, fighters get their subclass, their martial archetype, and I am going to recommend Battlemaster. I love Battlemaster so much. They're kind of like the jack of all trades of fighter subclasses. There is a maneuver for almost every situation, and we get to learn 3 of them, 3 maneuvers from a pretty long list. We can use these maneuvers to enhance combat in a variety of ways. We do so by expending a superiority die, and we get 4 superiority dice per short rest. They are d8s, and we use them with our maneuvers to add bonuses to whatever the maneuver does. So as far as which maneuvers I think we ought to take, I'm going to recommend Trip Attack, first of all, which tells us that when we hit a creature with a weapon attack, we can spend a superiority die, that d8, add that to the damage roll, and then the creature has to make a strength saving throw against our dexterity mod enhanced difficulty check. It could be strength also, but our strength is crap. Or the enemy is knocked prone unless they're a huge or greater creature. The more important maneuver, though, for us here is going to be Brace, which I've never actually used in a build before. So Brace works sort of like 1/2 of the Polearm Master feat. It's too bad there are no polearms with the finesse property, or we would have gone that route. But when a creature moves into your melee weapon reach, you can use your reaction to make an attack against them. If it hits, you add the superiority die in damage. So, like I said at the beginning, because this is happening as a reaction on the enemy's turn, you can add your sneak attack damage to this attack. Once we actually get sneak attack, that is. As for our third maneuver, I'm going to recommend Riposte. Riposte is great both because it feels like the perfect maneuver, frankly, for a rapier-wielding character, but also because it similarly allows you to use your reaction to make an attack, but this time against a creature who misses you with a melee attack. There are going to be times when, for whatever reason, you didn't get the chance to use Brace, but now you can still use your reaction for a Riposte attack instead, as long as you get missed with an attack. So now we've got multiple options to make an attack with our reaction on someone else's turn, and thus get sneak attack damage twice in a round. Speaking of sneak attack damage, as much as I'd love to grab that ability score increase or feat at Fighter 4, I think it's time for us to take our leave of the Fighter class. So our City Watch hero or mercenary has really been leaning into their knavish personality. If they haven't yet, I think they decide at this point that it's time to leave behind the organization that they cut their adventuring teeth on and strike out on their own, or perhaps with a small group of friends or like-minded individuals. Maybe your talents have been noticed, and you've been recruited to act as a scout for a smaller band of adventurers. Whatever your reasons, we are taking rogue levels now. So as a Rogue 1, we get Thieves' Cant, first of all, a special coded written language for rogues and thieves. And then we also get Expertise, and I do love Expertise. So basically you take 2 skills that you are proficient in. You do get to pick up 1 more skill proficiency when you multiclass into Rogue, and now you get to double your proficiency bonus when you make a check with those skills, or alternatively 1 skill and your proficiency bonus when you use Thieves' Tools. Personally, when I'm playing a Rogue, I like to go Stealth and Thieves' Tools first, but you do what you think best here. And then, of course, as a Rogue 1, we get Sneak Attack. So now, once per turn, if you have advantage on an enemy or an ally is within 5 feet of the enemy that you're attacking, you can add extra damage to an attack so long as you make the attack with a finesse or ranged weapon. This damage is a 1d6 for now, but it increases by 1d6 for every 2 levels that you gain in Rogue. Considering that we will ideally be getting this extra damage twice per round, at least during our Nova round, it makes it that much harder to multiclass away from Rogue at this point. Doesn't mean that we're not going to, but it becomes a difficult decision, and I really like difficult decisions, so that's okay. At level 5, we would be a Rogue 2, and we get Cunning Action. This is a pretty fantastic ability, really. As a bonus action, we can now disengage, dash, or hide. A lot of potential utility here, and I imagine using this quite often. Don't forget also, though, that Booming Blade now does 1d8 damage on the initial hit, and 2d8 damage if they move after they've been hit with it. This is really important for our tactics with this build because at level 6, we are a Rogue 3, and at level 3, Rogues get their subclass, their roguish archetype. And of course, we are going Swashbuckler. And here's what we read from the player's handbook on the Swashbuckler. You focus your training on the art of the blade, relying on speed, elegance, and charm in equal parts. While some warriors are brutes clad in heavy armor, your method of fighting looks almost like a performance. Duelists and pirates typically belong to this archetype. A swashbuckler excels in single combat. All right, you knave. You now get to fulfill your wildest Dread Pirate Roberts fantasy, because you are basically Wesley from The Princess Bride, with a shield. So as a swashbuckler, we get a couple of nice little features. First up, Rakish Audacity. This is going to give us a bonus to our initiative equal to our charisma modifier. It's really nice. It really makes me wish we could have afforded more points in charisma. More importantly, though, here for us, we can now qualify for sneak attack in a new way. If we are within 5 feet of our enemy and there are no other creatures within 5 feet of you, and you don't have disadvantage, then you can also get sneak attack. So you are a duelist indeed, and you really should be able to use sneak attack pretty much every round. Just make sure you pick your targets wisely. Swashbucklers also at this level get fancy footwork, and this is like the linchpin of our tactics. with fancy footwork, if you make a melee attack against a creature, they can't make opportunity attacks against you for the rest of your turn. So it's like a free disengage so long as you at least try to hit them first. Don't forget that our sneak attack damage now goes up to a 2d6 as well at this level. So at level 6, it's time for our first damage report, and this is how our Nova round works. There's 0 setup, which I love. You just pick a melee enemy who's not standing next to one of your allies. And by the way, you're going to want to discuss your tactics with your teammates to ensure that they don't run up and get within melee range of this enemy, because we want this melee enemy to not have any available targets unless they move, right? So on your turn, with advantage from your familiar, you will use Booming Blade as an action, dealing your rapiers 1d8 damage plus the extra 1d8 from Booming Blade, plus use the trip attack maneuver here and get 1d8 from your superiority die, plus 3 from your dexterity bonus, plus 2 from the dueling fighting style, plus 2d6 sneak attack damage. You would then action surge and do it all over again, not adding sneak attack the second time, of course, but obviously adding it now if you missed with that first attack. I'm going to assume that the enemy failed their saving throw on your trip attack and are thus prone, and therefore you have advantage on this second attack as well. You would then step away without taking an opportunity attack, thanks to fancy footwork, and wait for their turn just outside of their reach. On their turn, assuming that they don't just stand there doing nothing, which is a huge win for us and better than damage, they, in theory, move up to attack you. Upon doing so, they would take 2d8 damage of booming energy from Booming Blade, and you would use the brace maneuver with your reaction when they enter your reach to make yet another weapon attack, adding your sneak attacks 2d6 at this point, again, since it's a new turn now. It's the enemy's turn, right? Plus your weapon damage, plus 1d8 for your superiority die. So we have made 3 attacks, 2 with Booming Blade, 2 with sneak attack damage, all 3 with extra damage from a superiority die, and the first 2 of those attacks with advantage, for a total of 10d8 plus 4d6 plus 15 damage. Now, of course, things aren't always going to play out perfectly for you in this way every time you want them to. But as always, I like to do calculations based on best case scenario and let you guys adjust accordingly if, say, you don't have a melee enemy to attack, or there's just a single target and you have melee allies who are going to be standing next to them to make attacks, so they're not going to be moving, etc. Assuming that you get to duel someone who will be pursuing you against an enemy with a 10 armor class, you would do, on average here, 75 damage during this Nova round, and against an enemy with a 15 armor class, it would be 65 damage, on average. This is very good Nova damage, putting us very near the top of the Tier 1 Nova builds. If you missed the video that I did a couple of weeks ago where I broke down my Nova builds into 2 tiers, check it out here, assuming I have cards left. I think that might be my 5th and final one. What's really great is that this level of damage is doable per short rest, and you are still left with 1 superiority die, so you could even do this back up and brace tactic a couple of times per short rest. Or even more frequently, if you decide to forego using trip attack on 1 or 2 of those initial attacks you were taking. Of course, that would lower your Nova damage a little bit, but it would let you get your sneak attack twice per round, a few times per short rest now instead of just a couple of times. So just know your options and choose wisely. The only resources that we're spending here are Action Surge and our Superiority dice, both of which reset on a short rest, and that's fantastic. At level 7, we would be a Rogue 4, and we get an ability score increase or feat, finally. And I really want to take a half feat to bump our odd-numbered dexterity score. I think Piercer is probably our best option. To be honest, I don't love the feat necessarily for this build anyway. It's okay. The +1 to dexterity or strength, but dexterity for us is kind of the main draw here. But in addition, we do get to reroll the damage die from a piercing weapon once per turn. So yes, we could do this on our reaction attack as well as on our turn. It's not going to be a huge bump to damage on average, a little less than 1 point of damage on average, but it will feel really nice when you turn that 1 or 2 that you rolled into, a 7 or an 8, right? Also, with Piercer, When we get a critical hit with our rapier, we'll get to roll 2 more d8s instead of just 1 more d8 that you usually get on a critical. So that's another nice little occasional bump. At level 8, we would be a rogue 5, and we get the uncanny dodge feature. When an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack, you can have the damage with your reaction. This is a fantastic use of our reaction if we get hit with a massive hit or a critical or we're almost dead, etc. But just remember, of course, that we are depending on our reaction for our big Nova round at least. So use uncanny dodge wisely. And also, our sneak attack damage does go up to 3d6 at this point. So at level 9, there is one more class that I would like to take a dip into on this character. And some of you may have guessed it already if you were paying attention to our ability scores. While it is hard to break away from our sneak attack damage progression, among other things, now that we have our sneak attack up to 3d6, the numbers indicate that now is the time to take this break, make this dip, as it will give us a slight edge to our damage now on our Nova round, but it is an edge that will scale quite nicely throughout the rest of our career. Not to mention the increased utility that this dip will provide as well, and support capabilities. So yes, something has happened to our character at this point in their career that has really shaken them up. Something has put a little gravity into their usual light-hearted suave and charm. It might have been a brush with death, either a near-death experience themselves, or perhaps a close friend or a family member has died, one of your party members even. Maybe you even died but were brought back to life. Or alternatively, you may have had a run-in with a particularly vile undead creature or group of creatures, and the atrocities that the undead inflicted upon the living was so repulsive that you have found a passion kindled within to learn more about how you can stop the undead from ever ravaging others in the same way again. Whatever your reasons, we are taking some cleric levels now. Yep, we got religion. So, as a cleric, at level 1, we get spells, of course. We get some cantrips, we get some first level spells. For cantrips, I would be sure to at least take guidance. This lets you, as an action and with your concentration, give someone, including yourself, the ability to add a d4 to a skill check in the next minute. So obviously this is fantastic when you are about to stealth or pick a lock or disarm a trap, etc. A very nice little buff for all of your roguish skills. So don't forget to use it on yourself whenever you're about to make a skill check if you can. As for our first level spells, I'd be sure to pick up Cure Wounds and, or more importantly, Healing Word, I think. I don't expect you to do a ton of healing on this character, obviously, but being a backup in case of emergency option is a welcome boon for any party. Healing Word is particularly great for us as it lets us heal for 1d4 plus our wisdom modifier from 30 feet away as a bonus action, and we have a pretty flexible and available bonus action to bounce somebody up when they've gone unconscious without really suffering anything to our regular damage rotation. I think the most important spell for us, though, is the Bless spell. As I've said many times, it is one of the best buffs in the game. I think it gives a d4 to, us and 2 of our allies, right, up to 3 characters, I'm assuming us, on all of your attack rolls and all of your saving throws, so long as you maintain concentration. So it's a good thing we started fighter, and thus have proficiency in constitution saving throws, and thus our concentration checks. And at this point, we've got a decent armor class, we can disengage very easily, and we have a nice bonus to our concentration checks, not to mention our uncanny dodge. So maintaining concentration should be fairly easy for us, I think. And of course, Bless actually gives a bump to our concentration check too, because it's a constitution saving throw, right? And now we get to add that d4 to our hit chance, so it's actually a decent little bump to our damage as well. And our companions are absolutely going to love us for it. And at level 1 cleric, we do of course get our subclass, our divine domain, and we are going to go with the grave cleric, hence our fixation with death and or the undead. I think it will become fairly apparent why we're going this route next level, but for now we do get a couple of nice little features. First up, we get Circle of Mortality. This tells us that when we roll dice to restore hit points to a character who is unconscious, we get to heal for the maximum amount instead of a roll of the dice. It's a nice little bump to what will most likely just be a healing word spell for us. Not a big deal, but a couple of extra hit points on average in that scenario never hurt, especially since it's likely that the only time we'll be casting healing word on someone is after they've gone down to 0 hit points. We do also get the Spare the Dying cantrip for free, which is a pretty solid little cantrip. It lets you stabilize a creature who is making death saving throws, and so in case you're out of spell slots and you don't have healing word as an option, it can at least stabilize them and keep them from dying, right? Even better for us, we can cast Spare the Dying as a bonus action from 30 feet instead of as an action with touch. Just really bolstering our backup healer support capabilities without impacting our damage. We also do get the Eyes of the Grave feature here, which is an occasionally useful utility feature. Basically lets you detect the presence of undead within 60 feet. It's kind of like a weaker version of the Paladin's Divine Sense. You can do this Wisdom modifier times per day, so twice for us. So for our damage report at level 9, not a lot has changed tactics wise. We've simply picked up a plus 1d4 to our hit chance, an extra point of dexterity, the chance to reroll our rapier's damage once per turn, and another d6 for our sneak attack damage that we are ideally getting twice in a round. So against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would be doing 90 damage on average, and against an enemy with a 15 armor class, it would be 84 on average. We've scaled just a bit over the last 3 levels, but we have slipped a little bit when compared to other Nova builds, putting us at about in the middle of the pack of other T2, Tier 2 builds at this point. That said, we have picked up some nice support and utility options, and a great way to buff both ourselves and our allies, and we are about to see a fairly significant bump to damage on our Nova round, because at level 10 we are a Cleric 2, and this means we get Channel Divinity. So all clerics get the Channel Divinity feature, which they can use once per short rest to do a couple of different things. All clerics can use it to turn undead, which lets you, as an action, force undead within 30 feet to make a wisdom saving throw or spend 1 minute fleeing from you. But for us, the better use of our Channel Divinity will more often be to use Path to the Grave, which is unique to Grave Clerics and is one of the main reasons that we dipped into Cleric in the first place. So with Path to the Grave, as an action, you curse a target you can see within 30 feet. Until the end of your next turn, the next time you or an ally hits the enemy with an attack, the enemy has vulnerability to all of the attack's damage. That is really strong. Vulnerability is too infrequently used in 5th edition, in my opinion. But if you're vulnerable, it means you take double damage from whatever you're vulnerable to. And in this case, it's to all of the damage from an attack. Now, we gave up 1d6 of sneak attack to get this, right? We took 2 levels of cleric instead of potentially 2 levels of rogue. So among other things, we've sacrificed some sneak attack damage. Was it worth it? Path to the Grave can be a little tricky to really take advantage of if you're trying to bolster your own damage with the feature. I did use it in my Death Knight build that I did a few months ago, and I don't have cards to link to it, so if you're curious, look it up. But the big problem is, of course, that it takes your action to use Path to the Grave. So if you want to take advantage of it yourself, you really need either a super powerful bonus action attack, I guess, or Action Surge. Okay, we have Action Surge, but then the question becomes, is it worth giving up an entire action worth of attacks just so you can do double damage on your next attack, right? A lot of the times, maybe not. But in our case, where we don't have extra attack, we won't be getting it, and we can only use our sneak attack 1 time on our turn anyway. One of our attacks, even when we Action Surge, is doing a lot more damage than the other. So if we can double the damage from that one big sneak attack damage attack, then yes, I think it is better to use Path to the Grave here than just get a second attack that's less powerful. Now, The drawback to going this route is that even though it does improve damage on our Nova round, delaying our sneak attack damage scaling like we've done does worsen our sustained damage a little bit. We've picked up some nice utility and support from Cleric though, not to mention the Bless spell, and I am building this character with Nova damage in mind, so I think it's worth it, but I don't think that you would be wrong necessarily for deciding to stick with Rogue and foregoing Cleric levels, especially if you've got someone else in your party that's consistently casting Bless. Also though, one other thing that I really love about using Path to the Grave for our action surge here is that it is increasing our damage while lowering our number of attacks, meaning that we can save on our superiority dice, allowing for even more brace or riposte maneuvers between short rests. But at level 11, I think that our foray into the realm of the grave probably comes to an end. We had a brief goth phase, but we're over it. Or maybe more accurately, we probably feel that we've learned enough to become a disciple of our chosen deity, but realize that the best way to serve them will be to continue honing our roguish skills. It's time to return to Rogue now, I think. So we would be a Rogue 6 at level 11, and we would get another round of expertise, always fantastic. I would probably pick up either Perception or Sleight of Hand, and then Persuasion here, personally, and we'll discuss why in a minute. Don't forget that our Booming Blade damage goes up to 2d8 on a hit and 3d8 when they move at level 11. And I love it. With this character build, almost every single level we get both utility and a damage increase, and that feels really nice. At level 12, we would be a Rogue level 7, and our sneak attack damage goes up to 4d6, which is fantastic, and then we get the evasion ability. So with evasion, when we have to make a dexterity saving throw to take half damage against a spell or a trap or something like it, we now take half damage if we fail the save, and no damage if we succeed. It's really too bad that we don't have dexterity saving throw proficiency here, but with our high dexterity and the Bless spell active, we should be succeeding on our dexterity saving throws much more often than not. And even if we fail, only taking half damage is super nice. At level 13 then, we would be a Rogue 8, and we get another ability score increase or feat. So speaking of our dexterity, we definitely want to bump our dexterity here so that we can hit more, hit harder, get an armor class bump, and be better at all of our roguish utility skills. So for a damage report at level 13 now, our tactics have changed somewhat. Now, and ever since we were level 10 really, on our Nova round, we are using our action to curse our target with Path to the Grave, then using Action Surge, and with advantage, thanks to our familiar, plus a d4 to hit thanks to Bless, we are making one massive Booming Blade attack on our enemy that we should very rarely miss. If we hit, we do 1d8 for our weapon, 2d8 for Booming Blade, and 1d8 for the trip attack maneuver, plus 4d6 in sneak attack damage, plus 5 for our dexterity, plus 2 for the dueling fighting style, re-rolling the rapier damage if it's bad, all of which gets doubled thanks to Path to the Grave. Then, again, we would move away from ideally our melee enemy who isn't near any of our allies, and so on their turn they would hopefully move up to us, taking 3d8 from Booming Blade now, and letting us make a brace maneuver attack for 1d8 from our rapier, plus 1d8 for the superiority die, plus 7, plus 4d6 for our sneak attack damage again, for a grand total of 10d8 plus 12d6 plus 21. And so against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 130 damage on average. And against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be 124 damage on average. All right, that's almost a 50% damage increase since last we checked. Very nice. And again, we have some fantastic utility and support functionality, and still have a couple of superiority dice left per short rest, allowing us to get our sneak attack damage off an extra time per round once in a while, giving us a couple of mini burst rounds, which is wunderbar. All right, at level 14, we would be a Rogue 9. Our sneak attack damage goes up to 5d6 now, and we get from Swashbucklers the Panache feature. This is a really fun feature that I think a lot of people actually expected me to use when I did my Rogue tank build a few months ago that I don't have any cards to link to, but I thought it was a cool build. The problem with Panache, I think, is that it comes on so late. and it's reliant on our charisma to work well, and it requires our action to use. So it's just not a really great feature to build a tank character around, I don't think, but it does have its uses, and especially on this character that's doing most of their damage in a big Nova round, and then on subsequent rounds it's kind of okay if they're maybe not doing damage once in a while and they want to heal, or in our case, tank. So with Panache, as an action, you can make a persuasion check against an enemy's insight check, not typically particularly high for most enemies in D&D, and if you succeed on that persuasion check, which you most likely will if you took expertise in persuasion, that's why I wanted to do that, if the enemy is hostile to you, you basically taunt them, right? In other words, you give them disadvantage if they attack anyone but you for the next minute, or if you get more than 60 feet away from them, or if one of your allies hits them with an attack or a spell. That's a really strong taunt, and it kind of opens up, like I say, yet another role for our character to play, that of a tank. Although I would consider us at this point to be a little bit more of like an off tank, and that's mostly a video game term, I think, but essentially it means that you can fill that protect your allies by encouraging the enemy to attack you instead of them role decently well, once in a while kind of thing, if you really need to get an enemy off of your squishier, more vulnerable friends. I mean, at this point, assuming no magic items, with our dexterity score at 20, studded leather armor, and a shield, we're sitting on a 19 armor class right now, with some decent saving throws, assuming bless, okay health, and a way to, as a reaction, reduce damage dealt to us by half. And realistically, we probably do have some decent magic items currently. Maybe like a +1 shield, or magic armor, maybe a cloak of protection, etc. So there is a very strong chance that we're going to have over 20 armor class right now. We can take a hit or two, and if we're not going Nova on an enemy, being able to peel a bad guy off of your wizard ally will be a great additional tool to have in your bag of tricks. Also, if the creature isn't hostile to you, by the way, then if you succeed on your persuasion check, they're going to be charmed by you for a minute. So some nice potential out of combat utility. At level 15, we would be a rogue level 10. Unlike most classes, rogues get an extra ability score increase or feat at level 10, which is fantastic. And I think there are a lot of good options here. I think there are strong arguments to maybe bump charisma to improve our new panache feature, as well as our initiative, among other things. I think bumping constitution is a great idea for this character, especially if we want to lean into our new ability to function as an off tank. I can see going resilient wisdom here to improve that very important saving throw. I think of all of our options, I like the Sentinel feat best for this build. Sentinel feat's great because it gives us a number of benefits. It lets us make an opportunity attack against an enemy even if they disengage. It also lets us reduce an enemy speed to 0 when we hit them with an opportunity attack. And then, best of all, I think, it lets us use our reaction to make an attack against an enemy who attacks one of our allies if the enemy is within 5 feet of us. It's just more ways to reliably get attacks with our reaction, and thus potentially get our sneak attack damage off, especially if, we're out of superiority dice, or maybe you're in a fight against a single big bad boss that your melee allies are going to be standing next to, and meaning the big bad doesn't need to move and chase you to hit somebody, right? Or even if our DM is just not being nice and not making the enemies move up to try and get a hit against us, thus giving us a chance to use brace. So, Sentinel, muy bueno. At level 16, we would be a rogue 11. Our sneak attack damage goes to 68, and we get the reliable talent feature. This is another reason why bumping charisma maybe wouldn't have been the best option, I think, last level, because with reliable talent, anytime you make an ability check that lets you add your proficiency bonus, you can treat any roll lower than a 10 as a 10. That means we're very rarely going to be failing any ability check on a skill that we're proficient in, especially if we also have expertise there. So Panache should work pretty much every time we might want to use it. Unless, of course, you're going up against an enemy with a really high insight bonus. But even then, you've got a really high likelihood of succeeding. And then finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a Rogue 12, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I think there are still a lot of great options here. I'd probably just bump Constitution, I think, for more hit points, better saving throw. But like I said, Resilient Wisdom, I think, would be a great potential option. Or actually, now that we have the Reliable Talent feature, I would even consider taking the Skilled feat, which just gives us 3 more skill proficiencies and thus 3 more things to potentially almost never fail at. You pick whatever you think is best. Do keep in mind that at level 17, Booming Blade goes to 3d8 on hit and 4d8 if they move. And so, for our final damage report, not a lot has changed for us tactics-wise, but we have picked up an additional 2d6 damage to our sneak attack and another d8 of damage on our Booming Blade hit and movement. Not to mention the additional tankiness and utility that we've gained, of course. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would, during our Nova round, do, on average, 168 damage. And against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be 159 damage. That is admittedly quite good, but not amazing when compared to other Nova builds. But I do like how we've consistently increased by about 40 damage at each damage report. Consistent scaling is always really nice to see, especially when you are adding a lot more than just damage to boot, like we are. And so, final thoughts. We have a tier score to report on now with Nova builds like I do with my sustained damage builds, and for this character we came in at 107. That puts us near the lower end of the tier 2 Nova builds when you look at the character's career as a whole. But if we were to give a little more weight to the earlier levels, they would perform better. And again, this is compared to other builds that I've built specifically for Nova damage, so pretty decent. The fact that we can Nova at these levels once per short rest and then also have like mini Nova rounds even more frequently makes me feel really pretty good about the state of the damage. But even more than that, I think for this character, I really love the do-it-all feel. You know, strong Nova damage, fantastic roguish utility, of course, as well as the ability to be a sort of off-tank and even be like an emergency backup healer who buffs their allies as well. This might actually be the most well-rounded character I've made to date, and I think is probably my favorite rogue, at least. Maybe just because I love the Princess Bride so much, but there's definitely a strong appeal to playing a character who is highly charismatic, super versatile, light on their feet, quick-witted, and filled with bravado and panache. I really hope I get to play this character in game sometime soon. So that's the build for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it and sharing it with you. I love you guys dearly. Thank you so much for all of your support, everything that you do for me, for the channel. You're awesome. Please check out the other content on the channel if you haven't, including the sliding into my DM stuff, D&D University stuff, and our actual play Tales of Veneria stuff. But I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope to see you again soon. And until then, take care. See ya. Why, hello there. How's it going? Welcome, everybody, to... What's the name of the show again? Blah. Don't even say that. Blah, 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 blah. Ah, studio mode. What's that? Stop it. At level 3, rogues get their subclass, their roguish archetype. And, as you probably know, because you saw... because I said that we were building a swashbuckler. For our third maneuver, I would actually get riposte. Riposte. I'd probably get riposte to continue owning our roguish skills. Pronunciating things is hard. Also pronouncing them. Obladi, oblada, life goes on. Wah. And by the way, you do get to prick up. Not prick up. The plane. Can you hear the plane? I think you can hear the plane. How do I get out of this chair? It's so tight. Oh, I forgot to stop recording. That is a slow plane.